Yeah, I want to go over cutting and doing a nice clean cut if you had a brake line or a fuel line, or if you want to make a nice clean bend in a line, if you want to do a nice bend, or if you want to actually put a flare on a line too, where you can actually use these type of fittings. Now, on brake lines, you definitely don't want to use compression fittings. I'm not showing what those are. You want to use a true flare and two true double flare and a fitting, a proper fitting. If you want to repair a line, there's a rusty line, and say it goes behind a gas tank or goes behind someplace in the frame where you can't get to, and you only need to change one part of the line. We can cut the line nice and clean, make a flare, and make a repair. This I'm doing for a fuel line. Now, you can actually see this. This is it's actually an older package I have. These are the springs. You can make a nice clean bend, and it shows like you put the line inside the spring, and you'll be able to bend it without kinking it. You could actually still bend this line by hand without kinking it if you're careful. Another thing is you might want to, like say it fit in this tube, you might want to put this tube inside this tube to make sure that the spring wall has enough strength on the outside when you're bending a line, so you don't put a kink in it. Another thing you can do is you could put sand in the lines, sand, ordinary beach sand, regular fine sand, and use the tubes, especially if you got to make, you know, lines that go in like coils like this or something like that. Say it was like, you know, after the master cylinder, usually there's like a coil like this that's really coiled up. You got to make some really tight bends. You might want to do that. Then after, you know, if you're using it with the sand inside the line with the spring holding the outside wall of the brake line or the fuel line or whatever, you can make some pretty tight bends that are smooth. And then after you're done, since you use sand inside the line, you want to make sure you really blow it out with air. Now, to make a nice clean cut, you don't want to use a hacksaw. You want to use this mini pipe cutter. And you can see it's got a little cutting wheel on it, and it just goes over the line like this. And you turn it a bunch of times, and it cuts through the line nice and clean. I'll show you how that works. Well, it turned out my mini pipe cutter just broke, and had this number of years, but I was surprised it broke. But you know, basically the way you do it is you put the pipe inside here, and you turn it. You keep turning this around and around and around. You keep tightening down this wheel, and I guess the metal was fatigued. But there's another way of cutting it, and I did a nice clean cut. You don't want to use a hacksaw. I used a Dremel, and made a nice clean cut. And then when I went around it, I also flattened it out by going around this way, and I put a slight chamfer around the edge, so the flaring tool would work very well. Yeah, and this is a metric tool, so it has like these different size nipples, and basically that goes inside the pipe, you know, the tubing itself, to make this flare. So I got a 6mm in there, and this side screws into the other side of the tool. So, you know, basically it's sitting inside the tool here. That's the nipple. It's inside the pipe, and it's screwed inside the tool. You take the T-handle. Now, I've already made a pretty good size flare, and I put the vice grips on the end of it so I have extra holding power instead of just this damn thing. But to make it work easier, you know, they tell you to use brake fluid or WD-40. I always like using grease. Grease seems to really work when you're putting some real high pressure on something. You know, that's why it's in ball joints and stuff like that. So you can it'll actually do a lot smoother. It already made a nice flare, and I'll show you what it looks like. But basically, you just tighten it down against that, and these are different size holes. It's the 6mm one, the tubing in there, and the two wing nuts tighten down and clamp this together. So you have to make a nice flare, and I'll show you what it comes out to be. Okay, so that made a really nice flare, and I got some, you know, a bunch of brand new 1/4-inch fuel line here. So, you know, it'll be the perfect size for this. And two fuel line clamps. I'll put 2 clamps on it and make sure, because I don't know. Sometimes when these freaking hoses get older, that stuff happens. That's what happens. A lot of times you can get away with just 2 clamps without a flare on a fuel line, but You know, I just try to make things so it's foolproof. But anyway, use some grease on there. So a lot of times people have problems with these flaring tools. Now, this is a brand new metric one. I have an SAE one, but I had to get a metric one for this damn thing. And such is life, you know. Everything's going metric, right? Well, this is a Toyota carburetor, so that's what's going on. But anyway, use some grease because that makes it a lot easier. Also with the mini tool, and you know, this damn thing just broke, but it goes to show you can use a Dremel. I use a little Dremel. If you're real careful, you can make a nice clean cut. You'd have to use the top. You'd have to flatten out the top and make a chamfer. The mini pipe cutter is the best thing, so I got to get another mini pipe cutter. This thing's seen a hell of a lot of use, but it just broke right now, so that's the deal. Anyway, so that's what's going on. So, you know, when you do this type of stuff, you want to do this type of extra attention to detail because you'll have no problems. That's the whole deal. You want to make sure it's 100% reliable. And also for a brake line, you have to do this. You can't use compression fittings. I mean, you know, compression fittings is for like a dire emergency. You don't want to do that. You want to have an actual flare.